What do you say, everybody? Welcome to the Cubs Baseball Channel. Going to talk with Patrick Mooney from The Athletic. Before we do, though, let me ask you guys to join our roster, our all-star roster. We're looking for you to make this an all-star roster, and it's easy to do. It's free. Like, subscribe, and give us a thumbs up. And let me remind you that the Cubs Baseball Channel is presented by the Tennessee Smokies. They just won their first championship in 45 years, and the Smokies right now in the team store with some of that great championship swag. And I know Cubs fans like to look fresh when they're out on the streets. Well, you need to do that with the Smokies. And that's what we got going on right now. How about now? There you go. Now you can hear me. Well, what's up, brother? How you been?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Great to see you again. The wire here on my headphones spun the spun the microphone shut.
I think that Smokies team store ad just blew out my speakers or something.
Did it? Yeah, it's loud, right? It's loud. I say they said they wanted to sponsor my channel. I'm like, I'm not turning that down. I'm a seasonal guy, right? So
totally.
does that make me full time now? That's bridged the gap. There's so much to talk about with the Cubs, and you cover the team every day, and you know you great stories on The Athletic. I'm a subscriber. I love to read the stuff that you guys do. This season, I mean, I got to start out with the negative. I mean, this season's a disappointment to me. They didn't make the playoffs, the way that things ended. You know, on this channel, a lot of people that are going to watch this are pointing the finger at David Ross. My take on it is that he's a great guy. You know him from being around the Cubs as a player. And then, you know, obviously when he was manager, I don't think you could find a better person. I appreciate the fact that this team played really hard, even when they were losing at the end. But throughout the season, they were 10 down and then they come fighting back. And that was really incredible. I would have traded, you know, everyone knows this. I would have traded at the deadline. And but I also enjoyed the run. Don't get me wrong. Like, it was great. But I would have traded at the deadline and built up, because I feel like if you end up where the Cubs ended up, and that's not making the playoffs, you just wasted, you know, the opportunity to get a lot better by taking advantage of the market itself. But the thing that I guess concerns me is some of the use of the bullpen, some of the in-game decisions, and the fact that the guy came from Dancing with the Stars and, you know, ESPN to manage. And I look at a lot of the other managers that are having success around baseball, and they did it in the minor leagues, or they did it as a coach, you know, after being a player, you know. So I feel like some of this stuff is part of the learning curve of just learning this job. And this is like legitimately the first playoff race that he's been in. And if he gets better next year, I mean, then it's all worth it, right? But that's kind of my take on David Ross and the way that things ended for the Cubs. What was yours?
Well, let's look at the stakeholders here, right? I mean, the owner of the team says he's our guy. He did a great job. The team president who helped hire him raves about almost everything he does, while allowing for some room for disagreement in terms of in-game decisions. And then the biggest names in the clubhouse all have his back. And Mick, you know how those clubhouses operate. I mean, you have a lot of feel, and I think that is where David Ross is exceptional. I think pulling them out from 10 games under, I think, is a very strong sign of his leadership skills. To me, I think a lot of the in-game stuff is a little overblown, to be honest. Like, I don't think the roster that was handed to him was some sort of like World Series contender. I don't think they squandered a championship season, but like, no doubt when the margins are like this razor thin, there's going to be a lot of uncomfortable questions being asked of like, what happened, what could have been done differently, what should happen in the future. And it's crazy to think, like, if the Cubs win one more game and are in the playoffs, we're not having this conversation.
Right.
But they didn't win that game, and they lost so many agonizing close games in the last, say, 3 weeks of September after their playoff odds had soared above 90%. That, yeah, I mean, Jed Hoyer said it. This is going to be a really big year for everyone next year, but certainly the manager. He's not a rookie manager anymore. He's going into year 5 in the job. And I think what I will say about David Ross, that he is open to that type of feedback. He is not, an arrogant, stuck in his ways type of leader. Like, he very much has all these conversations internally. And I do think some of these decisions, it's hard to like separate the front office from the coaching staff, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no doubt. Look, I respect David Ross and the players and the fact that they have backed him, and they should. I mean, he's one of their guys, and he's been a player's manager. But I guess my question is, accountability. If it's not on him, then who's it on? Because this, to me, should have been a playoff team. I just think they were better than Miami. If they beat Arizona at all, besides the one game that they won, if they win 2 more of those games, we're not talking about this right now. And to me, it's like, okay, well, I know it was only one game, but it was one game that kept you out of the playoffs. And to me, that's the bar that you set for yourself, and you didn't reach that. And that's a bar that we haven't seen reached here lately.
Yeah, I think this is not, really my opinion as much as trying to understand it from, let's start at the top with ownership, right? I mean,
Right.
Tom Ricketts, how he thinks about things. And I think stability and sustainability are very important to him, and how you get there, we can disagree on that. But I mean, generally speaking, this is a pretty patient organization that prioritizes the long term, the longer horizon over like kind of playing the blame game immediately. And I think that accountability that you speak of will come in the form of heightened pressure, heightened expectations for next season. I think it'll be interesting to see what some of these exit interviews yield in terms of, how do they shape the coaching staff? Do some of the processes change? Are we going to see a little more load management with certain players? I think you have to look at too, like, just some of the ways a bullpen can be constructed. And like, sure, it's great. Like, you never want to overpay, for some of these like not closer type relievers, who get the deals at the winter meetings. Are like, oh man, how can you believe, that guy got that contract? And it's like, well, sometimes you have to pay for experience, and sometimes you have to pay for the know-how. And I think clearly, to me, I mean, the bullpen, Jed himself said, like, I didn't give Ross a lot to work with at the beginning of the season. They found a great formula there for the bulk of the season. And then the guys just ran out of gas at the end, at a time when your opening day starter was dealing with multiple issues. And, there are broader trends in the game that I'm curious to see how the Cubs adapt. I mean, you and I have talked about this, of like these 5-inning starting pitchers, it's like 2 times through the lineup and gone. And, I still feel like the jury is still out on some of this pitching development stuff. I think there have been individual success stories. There are promising signs for the future. I mean, you've seen a lot more of Cade Horton than I have, but like, whatever progress has happened, it wasn't good enough to make the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, look, I'll tell you, it'd be excited about Cade Horton. I mean, a legitimate front end guy. He's honestly, I think he's one of the best that they've had in my time. Cashner and throw him in there, and Kyle Hendricks. They've had a few, not a lot, but they've had a few. And this guy, he stacks up there. He's got just an amazing slider that he can throw wherever he wants. He's a difference maker. Fastball, he knows how to pitch. He's got a little bit of that meanness you like. so I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do, but I don't know that he's ready right now. I think he's got to be a little bit more accurate, maybe just sand the edges. I'd love to see him use a changeup a little bit more, but he's great. I mean, he's a top end pitching prospect, and I think you have to have those in this day and age. The game plan used to be, we'll draft and develop these position players, and then we'll buy pitching. But the problem is there's just not a lot of pitching to buy.
Yeah, and that gets real expensive, right? I mean, we saw if you're constantly trading from your farm system and, signing multiple relievers every year, and, you still have to go do those big deals for a John Lester, Yu Darvish, and those both worked out, very well. But yeah, I think they're going to need some pitching to bubble up, because if we're assuming that the Cubs pick up Hendricks option, Stroman opts in, and Drew Smyly opts in, that's, off the top of my head, roughly like $45 million in, kind of pitching payroll commitments on top of Tyone, on top of Jordan Wicks and some of these Javier Assad. Several they have some layers there that I think will serve them very well next year. But if you had that guy who could come close to 200 innings, that would take the pressure off of everyone, obviously. And I just don't know if they'll go there when you're going to have to either re-sign Cody Bellinger or find someone to approximate his production. And even just doing that only gets you back towards a baseline of like, low 80s, mid 80s wins. I think they need, 2 impact hitters, or you saw, you've known Jeimer Candelario for a long time. I mean, when he was healthy and he was right,
he was good.
It was a real nice piece to have when you're, 30th out of 30 major league clubs in first base production. Like, to get a guy who's, above average can make a big difference, especially if he can bounce to third and switch hit and all those type of things. So at this point, I don't know how star driven they will be, or if you could just kind of raise the floor at multiple positions. I do think that would go a long way too.